James Dahlgren. I've been practicing in internal medicine with a subspecialty in toxicology for over 50 years. In 1971, I was called the only doctor. I was doing a fellowship. There was no full-time person. I was called because I was doing research on the toxicity of antibiotics. And there was a group of workers at a lead smelter in Los Angeles who were sick and they wanted some help. So instead of going into the field of internal medicine and infectious disease and antibiotics, I became interested and fascinated by the poisoning of human beings by common occupational practice. They were melting down old batteries to recover the lead. And all 200 workers in that factory were sick. And over half of them retired on full disability when I helped them identify and document why they were so sick. Since then, my life has been dedicated to helping people who have been poisoned. Originally, the first 25 years, it was mainly occupational poisoning. I was the first doctor to testify about asbestos being a cancer-causing agent, and it should be banned. I also, back to the lead smelter, we got the lead requirements in the workplace reduced by 80%. They were allowing, the government was allowing very high levels. And of course, everybody was getting sick, and it was within legal limits. So we got it to come down. There's two things I think I can point to that had profound effects and was worth the effort I was putting in to try to help human beings who were being poisoned needlessly by industry because they didn't care about people. Well, a few years later, I became involved in a case involving some people who lived in Hinckley, California, where they got poisoned from the water that they were using. They all lived on small farms or small acreage, and their water was from their own wells. Turns out PG&E had a heat transfer facility just on the edge of town, edge of this community, where they were using a chemical called chrome-6, to affect some operational things in their cooling towers. These people got terribly, terribly sick from their exposure. Cancers, particularly in the children who were dying of cancer. Aaron Brockovich went out to that community and united them and got them to file a suit, and of course, most of them got enough money so they could move away. And that's when I got involved in community poisonings. And I've now been around the country, and I won't bore you with the details, but that, as has been said just a few minutes ago by these very wonderful people that have been working in East Palestine, what they're saying I've seen over and over and over again over the last 50 plus years that I've been doing this. First, it was industry that didn't care about their workers, and now we see it's industry that doesn't care about the communities they poison. And what they do, like you are all being told, the EPA, when it was first founded, ironically, back in 1970, 71, under Nixon, of all people, they actually did a pretty good job for a couple of years. The first thing they did was Times Beach, Missouri, where they actually evacuated people and they did some stuff. They also did some stuff at Love Canal up in upstate New York. They helped the people there, they closed the neighborhood, they actually did something good. But that was the end. EPA, after that, became completely dishonest. And I've worked with community groups, doctors, lawyers, all across the country, and the EPA is on the side of industry. They're not on the side of the people. Their original charge was to help people, but they don't do that anymore. And you can see that what happened here. And unfortunately, that's true for the state and usually the counties. They usually get pressured by economic factors into not helping people. So what we have to do here, there's been hundreds of fires involving lithium batteries all around the world. But not a single study has been done of the health effects of those people. Not a single study, at least with dioxin and with some of the metals, we actually have some studies. But there's not a single study of human beings being exposed to a lithium battery fire. Now we have at least 20 different articles that I read over the last few years that I document the risks. They all document that it's a highly risky thing. That fire put out at least 100 known toxic chemicals. And when they do their risk assessment, do you all know what a risk assessment is? It's where they estimate based on some animal data the concentrations that might have an adverse effect. Almost never on human data. Well, they found that the hazardous index from a fire involving lithium batteries is 100 times higher than it should be, based on extrapolation from animal studies, which are all generous. They're not really as tight as they should be. So the fact that we have good documentation that this is highly, highly dangerous to be involved in, and it will have not only acute effects, but chronic effects. The community will be the soil, the water, the air, the homes, the house dust, your soil around your homes is all contaminated from that fire. So you have continuing exposure. It needs to be measured, it needs to be removed, it needs to be remediated if it is found to be high, like I'm sure it will be in the cases of many of your homes. We also have to do a health study, because they can argue all they want about the risk assessment and counting the number of micrograms or milligrams of this or that that's in the soil or in the air or in the food or in your house dust. But what really counts is, are people sick from it? That's what moves people. That's why there's not been a single study of the health effects from the lithium battery fires. Not a single study of the health effects in human beings. And they actually, in animal studies, haven't even done animal studies with the 100 elements that are present in the fire from a lithium battery factory like this, or storage facility. So it's like conspiracies and manipulation and figuring out a way to hide the health effects that are coming from it. And this is going to be a seminal moment for us if we can do detailed health studies on everybody in this community and link it to their exposures. So that's what I'm here to do, and I hope we can complete that study. And it'll be the first study that's ever been done. It'll be similar to what I've done in other cases. I'll be the one that helps pull together, my colleagues and to identify the problem and do something about it.
I want to talk a little bit about my background, and I'll get to the first of Moss Landing is the 79th disaster I've been in 19 years. The first one was my own. I'll get to that, but I want to really compliment this community for how you've come together and done your own testing. Like in our first call, Brian, you guys are united. Don't let the PR people divide you. That's why the PR people make the big money, because most of the time it works. And I want to say these presentations today, thank you for motivating me to do even more. And what I say after going through this, we live in a world now that I believe people can come together. We can all agree that we should have a clean environment, safe food, safe water, and we should leave this world a better place and cleaner for our children. And what a lot motivates me, one of the primary things, I have 2 daughters, my first grandchild, a year and a half old. Your children and your grandchildren are not going to remember you by how much money you made or didn't make. They're going to remember, did you do the right thing? Did you do the ethical thing? Did you make a tough decision and leave them in a better place? So I really believe at the end of the day, most people want to do the right thing. You know, I always give people the chance to come out and do the right thing. So now to talk a little bit about my first disaster, you know, it was June 28, 2006. I owned a factory with 100 employees in upstate New York. There was what they call a 500-year flood, oil contaminated water, shut down the whole factory. Insurance company declared the manufacturing space in the basement, didn't pay. So I immediately went out and I liquidated my entire life, rebuilt everything, and got to be back to work. And I walked the streets. This is the other motive. I walked the streets, had employees that didn't know how they were going to get formula for their babies, feed their families. Did everything I could to get everybody back to work. We were able to recover, work through it. And when I realized in the middle of this, here I thought that when the government agency tells me the water is safe, it's safe. But you think, and then I realized that all these standards are based on a flawed assumption that water and contamination are always in equilibrium and are steady state. The only time it's a steady state is if it's an aquarium or a jar. So you can take a water sample from the top of the water and declare it safe. Nothing in it. It's very easy to gain. So then I started realizing there's something called a water column beneath the surface above the bottom where life is. You got to take the samples from the water where the life is, not just from the bottom or the top. So I started to realize this, and then as I liquidated my life and rebuilt the company, I became obsessed with oil and water. I had a product sitting in the corner at the time that was a medical product, Homeland Security responders. If it's actually approved as a medical device, it doesn't have plasticizers or phthalates, which goes back to vinyl chloride and all that stuff. And that product was, you know, absorbing oil and helping cleaning out. So roll forward, I said I'm going to liquidate my life, put the company back together. BP happened. I went down to the BP oil spill, and it turned out they were able to use the technology that basically I invented from this horrible disaster, and were able to prevent the burning of marshes in 200 miles. So that's how it started. And then I started with some NOAA scientists that really talked about, you know, Scott, you got some good ideas. You might want to file for some patents. So I have about 25 different patents, most of which where I'm a named inventor on all, most of which are related to environmental testing. And something recently, too, that drives me passion is, and this ties into Conyers, Georgia, it ties into Moss Landing. I had scientists from the San Juan Islands in Washington. When they first reached out to me, said, Scott, we read about you, your patents. We can't figure out what's killing all the eelgrass. You know, we got the orca pods and everything. And to show I thought San Juan, I didn't know Washington. The islands are beautiful. So we started working up there with the eelgrass, and one of the labs we're using here is ALS Kelso, which is one of the predominant crop labs that I'm going to be using here in their testing for PFAS too. And the other lab I use is urethans, which I've used in East Palestine. So that's kind of how all this is connected in all these communities. And basically, what you see here is complete systemic failure, complete betrayal by the government agencies that are supposed to protect all of the communities, all the taxpayers. And what really motivates me is to really, today I can't thank you enough for allowing me to be here and just witness, starting with Jamie, with Brian, and all of you that have spoken. Sometimes I apologize, I'm terrible at remembering names. I wouldn't make a good politician because I can't remember names right away, and I'm too honest. So back to my first disaster, so 500-year flood. That was a press conference with Senator Chuck Schumer at the time. Senator Hillary Clinton was my other senator, and George Pataki, a Republican governor. And believe it or not, it was just 19 years ago. There was no politics involved. It's getting back to, it's about the environment. It's about a community coming together. No one was playing this for politics. And I want to do everything I can to bring communities together and try to help change all this. So, and this will be available on the Moss Landing Facebook group tonight. It'll be available on my Facebook group. And that's a live link to, if you want to see on the background, 19 years ago, a press conference with me talking about recovery and the disaster and walking through the floodwaters and so on. Next slide, please. Now, I'm a whistleblower client of the Government Accountability Project. They are very important. I wouldn't be standing here, wouldn't be able to do what I do without their protection. In East Palestine, they reached out to me in September of 2023. I officially became a client. And Norfolk Southern, I was coming back, Jamie, I was from that October 16th Unity Council meeting. I was at the Cleveland airport. I live in Cape Cod, so the Barnstable sheriff calls me and says, "Are you Mr. Smith?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, I have some papers to serve you. I have papers to serve you. So I called my personal attorney and said, "I'm not in any litigation right now. Do you really think Norfolk Southern is stupid enough to try to subpoena me?" Sure enough, I went home, and I don't run from subpoenas, and it was Norfolk Southern. You know the expression, throw a rabbit in the briar patch? Well, and the scientific team I work with, like, "Oh, how you doing?" and everything, but I'm not built like other people. And this subpoena motivated me, and the Government Accountability Project, I'm talking about this because I know other potential whistleblowers are watching today, and I know there's some potential ones out here, and I can tell you, you can trust Leslie Pacey, Tom Devine, the legal, you can trust them with your life. Their protection on me is better than armed guards, it really is. Because all the smears, all the attacks, all the trolls, all the public relations firms, they protect you in every way imaginable and legally. So that is a link to their website too. They also have a food safety division, and they do FOIAs, and I work with them on that. So they've started to look into Moss Landing, and I hope on one of my follow-up trips I'll be able to bring Leslie Paisley with me like I did at East Palestine at some point. Also want to, I probably wouldn't be standing here working in Conyers, Georgia, or meeting any of you great people if it weren't for somebody named Courtney Miller. And I promised her family that I would always never let people forget about her. On February 17th of 2023, she reached out to me, it was Twitter at the time, said, "Please come help me test my water." I wasn't really going to go to East Palestine because, you know, there was a small creek. I thought, wow, the fire's out. I got there on the ground. I was going to go there 2 times. I've never seen in all my experience such blatant corruption orchestrated between the EPA and everything. The same playbook over and over again that I've seen for 19 years, but on steroids in East Palestine. So I'm a pretty stubborn individual. I fight on principle, and going 2 to 3 times turned 27 trips and 31 rounds of testing. And Courtney Miller passed away at 36, way too young. And left 2 beautiful kids behind. And I promised her best friend and family that I would, every community, will never let her forget. And in December of 2024, Government Accountability Project had nominated me for an international award, and this award is really not about me, it's about Courtney and the communities, and there's a link to it for positive social change. So you want to ask, this is another big thing that motivates me, is people like Courtney Miller, people like all of you in the room, about why we're doing what we're doing. But as tough as this world is, it can change by millions of people coming together. Next slide. And I want to talk a little bit more about this, and I'll get into the testing plan, but I wanted to provide this context and background because in Moss Landing, what you're going to face, because of all the crops here and the issue with green technology, this is going to be a big challenge. So staying united is huge. This battle can be won, but it's going to be the long game, and it's going to be a war because there's a lot of corporate influence, and the systemic failures we have are all based by the undue influence. And one other thing is the Norfolk Southern attorney that subpoenaed me was from WilmerHale, named San Francisco Davina Pujara, ex-EPA attorney. You go to her background, and it talks about environmental justice, environmentalists. Well, she sold out, and I'm glad you asked me that, Brian. I'm think, I probably have 50 things that motivate me. What really motivates me is people like Davina Pajara. She started this, she painted me in my driveway, so I can use her name. And she wants to claim she cares so much about the environment. Well, she sold out and tried to work for Norfolk Southern and shut everything down. So that is what has to stop in the corporate capture. And another whistleblower with Government Accountability Project is Stephen Petty. I'm trying to think of, Jamie, how to efficiently and succinctly explain this. Stephen Petty was the class actions expert witness. And I was doing a Twitter Spaces. I had no idea who he was talking. He started talking to me after that Twitter Spaces. Scott, you've got more testing over time. You've got more stuff. I mean, how would you, I'd like to talk to you more and more. And we started talking, and then all of a sudden there was a settlement. And he had been on the media, the class action attorneys withheld his testing, never gave him to the clients. And they said nothing to see here. And this is all over, you can see on the YouTube site and social media, the class action attorneys, me independently on the media, and Stephen Petty, all saying the same thing, except for what was around April 10th, Jamie. On April 10th, what happened was the class action attorneys got $180 million award. And then they brought in Arch Carson and the whole narrative changed. So this is all part of our systemic failure. And Stephen Petty has a sworn declaration, talks about my testing, and he talks about how, like Brian, you were talking about EPA, the control samples, they went into where the plumes were contaminating. We went and got control samples where the plume wasn't. So, and there's also a link to my sworn declaration in the Hill interview. So as people contact you, just know that to the best of my knowledge, the only two people that have been testing in East Palestine that have actually signed sworn declarations under the penalties of perjury are the two of us. So with all the statements coming from everybody else, nothing to see here, okay, go sign the statement. So, and then the Society of Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry. This data is important to your community. Why? Because you've got these plumes from East Palestine to Conyers to Moss Landing. Well, the chemicals are a little bit different. There are more similarities than you think. And these are all links that you can go to. Next slide. I also have an expression of you can't find what you don't look for, and that's what you see over and over again. That's the playbook, and that's why the other side kind of doesn't like me too much, because it's that simple. You can't find what you don't look for. If you don't look for dioxins, you can say there's no problem. And then the next narrative, watch, as these results start coming back, the next narrative, I can tell you right now, and I said this on TV interview before, in the next week that EPA was saying that the narrative is going to be it's ubiquitous in the environment. Blame the victim. You know, you did this in college, you did that in college, you're exposing yourself to the chemicals at home. When you don't really need my testing or anybody else's testing to know none of your health symptoms were ubiquitous before the event. But this is the approach. Given that I was just here on the 17th, and I don't have preliminary results. I wanted to talk about the logic, and I'm going to be staying for meetings tomorrow, and I'm here to listen to the community, and I'm probably going to come back for a week once we get these preliminary results. But I want to show you the methodology of logic. If you've got concerns or suggestions, all ears. But this was the presentation that we were invited to give, the scientific team that worked with me, and what we do is we characterize the fate and transport of all, especially what are called the persistent compounds, the chemicals that don't go away, like the dioxins and the SVOCs. And we put this together laying out all the different methods, what we used, how we did it. Next slide. And this is the same approach we're using in Conyers and everywhere. So what we do is we measure what we call background. And you'll see up here, and we went where the plume was not to get the control sample. And Brian would talk about tomorrow about picking where we're going to take control samples here. We definitely knew it wasn't there, so we take the control sample. For example, on the dioxins, I won't get into it on this presentation, but there's something called toxic equivalency, which is, it's basically an index to see how contaminated things are. So we knew that control was 1.7. We knew that even the Norfolk Southern contractor, Arcadis, they were using 4.8 as a threshold to do testing. So what we were looking at is background for urban industrial areas. So if you want to be conservative to lay your position out, especially with the other side. So let's say you want to declare background. We didn't make an official declaration, but you want to say the background is 8 parts per trillion TEQ. Well, 33% of our samples were over 8. 45% were over the very own Norfolk Southern contractors set rate of 4.8. So what we do with this is we try to identify what we call hot zones. That doesn't mean the other zones aren't contaminated because you get into the mixtures, but these, we were able to identify the hot zones. And that's the goal here. Hot zones is where you really got a problem. That doesn't mean the other zones aren't zones for concern, but we want to try to identify the high contamination. And then we also take, there's also for the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, we calculate a TEQ of 30.6. And go to the next slide, please. And we had TEQs in the hundreds with this. And then this is a slide from BioLab where you had the ash raining down. Next slide. And this is what we call the fingerprint. This is really what we're going to do here. And every fingerprint is different with dioxins. And when they tell you you generated the dioxins from your backyard barbecue, we'll be able to tell you why that's not true. Next slide. This is where I compared. The other thing is I'm using the same lab, so I can compare East Palestine, Conyers, and Moss Landing, and no one else can do that. And these are all 3 locations. Next slide. And this is where in Conyers, believe it or not, the dioxin particles on the surfaces we tested were 752% higher, and that is an identified location where people are very sick, right near ground zero. Next slide. Furnace filters, air filters in your cars, why they matter? Because unless we're going to take biopsies of your lungs, the next best thing is to see what particles are remaining on the filters. Next slide. Human hair is 50 to 70 microns, so you're talking about particles you can't see. Next slide. Then I got into these furnace filters, and you realize all these different MERV ratings. At the end of the day, what this says, you're lucky if you capture 20 to 30%. Everything else is flowing through. So if we can see, at this point in time, it's about identifying what you may have been exposed to, not about levels. They're going to try to shift you about declare a singular use, a singular exposure to a singular chemical. That's irrelevant. It's about mixtures of chemicals. There are no standards for mixtures. That's called synergistic toxicity. That's the thing they don't want to talk about. Next slide. And this is a map of the 6 sites and 45 samples I have taken so far. So we'll be updating this map and going with the Moss Landing group. But we're right in where the plume has been identified. And next slide. This is my last slide. Remember this, the 5 Ds. I met Dr. Beecher Skolem from University of San Diego. She taught me about the 4 Ds. I added a 5th. There's a reason the government agencies, the responsible parties spend so much money, because PR works. First you delay, then you deny, then you discredit, then you dismiss. If that doesn't work, you defame. And then with that being said, I want to also just have Dr. Jim Dahlgren, who lives in California, is going to be one of the ones advising me as I go forward here. And he is an expert, he's a medical doctor.